Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 9th and tonight's movie is Maxine. They added two more X's to Maxine, I guess to reference the fact that she used to do adult films. This movie seems sort of like Pearl in the fact that it does take place in the same universe and has some of the same characters, but it really just kind of seems to want to be its own story. This movie takes place in 1985, and X took place in 1979, so that's 6 years later. And Maxine seems to actually be on the edge of her big break of becoming a Hollywood starlet. But there seems to be two issues. The first is the fact that her quote unquote dark past may be revealed. I don't know if that's referencing the things that we learned about her in X, the things that she did in X, or something we don't even know about yet. And the other problem is the serial killer. The serial killer in the movie is called the Night Stalker, and there actually was a serial killer called the Night Stalker in LA. And 1985 was in the middle of his killing spree. Fun fact, at the time, my mother lived in that area, and she was exactly his type, too. That is so weird to think about. In the movie X, we never really learned much about Maxine's past or really that much about her as a character. We learned at the very end that she's the daughter of an evangelical pastor and she's completely estranged from him. He doesn't even know where she is. But in that movie, nothing really came of that. It was just something they threw in at the end. So perhaps this time we're going to learn about her the same way we learned about Pearl in the last movie. I'm going to go give it a watch and tell you what I think. This one definitely wasn't as good as the first two. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I think I would have given it a 7 if it wasn't for one really dumb thing that happened in the writing. I would describe Maxine as a less interesting version of X because the cast of characters was not nearly as good. And with Pearl, the main character was Pearl, who was very interesting, like psychologically. And this one, the main character is obviously Maxine, who in the first movie, X wasn't really given a lot of characterization. And honestly, she wasn't really given that much characterization in this movie either. There really isn't much we learned about her that's different than what we learned about her in the first movie. In the first movie, we learned that she really wanted to be a movie star. She was kind of full of herself. She was addicted to cocaine. Her father was a televangelist, and she acts kind of cold sometimes. And that's basically what we got in this movie, too. Mia Goth definitely got to do more as Maxine in this movie than she was able to in X. The movie looks great. We all know how much Hollywood loves Hollywood. So if Hollywood's going to make a movie about Hollywood, they're going to make Hollywood look as good as they can. The soundtrack was pretty good too. There's a lot of classic songs in there. When it comes to like horror and thrills, there wasn't really much of that. There's more of like a mystery or like a drama. I really don't have that much to say about Maxine without going into spoilers because it's not that there's anything particularly bad about this movie except for this one thing that I'll talk about later. It's more just like it doesn't have any of the really good, interesting things that were in X and especially Pearl. There's nothing about this movie that really makes it feel like the movie needed to exist. This is how they needed to end the trilogy. I felt like it was fine with just the first two movies. Obviously, it wasn't bad, but I didn't really love it. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10 because I can't tell you it was a bad movie. I just didn't think it was a great movie. And now I want to talk about some spoilers. I feel like the Night Stalker in this movie was absolutely based on Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker in real life. But in this movie, they established that the killer that Maxine really needs to worry about, it seems to be a copycat killer. And when I learned that, I was thinking there's only one option for who it could be if this movie is going to be predictable. And it was very predictable. It was the estranged priest father. And I am so mad at myself that I cut this out. But I was so considering saying in the first half, I hope that they don't figure out a way to somehow turn the Night Stalker into a fundamentalist Christian. Because I thought that was dumb. I thought that was something so ridiculous they couldn't have possibly done that. And they kind of did. It wasn't straight up trying to almost rewrite history or present their own version of history like it was in The Sacrament, but they did make the main killer, the copycat killer of the Night Stalker, into the priest father. This has happened 2 out of the 2 times I've seen Ty West make a movie concerning true crime, or at least related to true crime. That is such a specific thing to happen twice. Again, this isn't nearly as questionable as what they did in The Sacrament, but this is still in the same category. Anyway, one of the big questions I had going into this is that are they going to show us that at their core, Maxine and Pearl are fundamentally different or that they're fundamentally very similar? And by the end of it, I think it was leaning towards the latter. One of the first scenes in the movie is her experiencing an attempted, at least mugging, where the guy has a knife, but then she pulls out a gun, so she's the one calling the shots. She demands that he strips naked, gets on the ground, and then she uses her healed feet to crush his testicles. And before she did that, she said, "Do you know what I did to the last person who tried to kill me?" And I was thinking, "He ran over her with your car." And she says, "I crushed her skull." So if we're to believe that, she has not killed anybody since the events of X. For most of the movie, she has this PI coming after her, played by Kevin Bacon. I don't understand why Kevin Bacon was given like later billing than Halsey, even though Halsey had like one scene and then she died. It wasn't even just her, it was a lot of other characters that had much less screen time but were billed higher than he was. And it's not like Kevin Bacon isn't a big name that they could have plastered all over their movie. And then when it became clear that he was getting in the way of her work, her potential at that big breakthrough, she, along with her manager, kill him by crushing him in a trash compactor at a junkyard. But then at the very end, where like all the big final battle has happened, and at this point, the priest father is dead to rights. There are helicopters with searchlights above them. She's right there. Like the police had already called him back up, so clearly she's not the one in trouble. She could just stand there, and even though they repeatedly say, "Put your weapons down," she shoots him in the head and kills him. There is no reason to not believe that she isn't willing to do anything it takes to achieve her dream. And she gets the dream at the end and she says, "I just hope this never ends." So I guess the only real difference is that Maxine actually did get what she wanted. So, final thoughts on this entire trilogy of movies. I prefer just the first 2 movies. This last one wasn't really bad, but it also wasn't really necessary, in my opinion. And this whole thing, the point of this all was to give a fair shake to both Ty West and Mia Goth. Mia Goth, absolutely, 100%. She has earned her place as a Scream Queen. As for Ty West, I'm not exactly going to be chomping at the bit to watch any more of his movies because I kind of stayed away from him because he did this one really weird specific thing I hated. And he kind of did it again at the first opportunity. So I feel like my vibe about him was not off. He's just not for me. But Mia Goth, A plus. When I was saying that the theme for a lot of these movies was second chances, this was mostly what I was referring to. I was not expecting to get through all of them so quickly. There is still one more, and we will get to that when we get to that. But for now, I'm done, and I'll see you tomorrow with a fresh new movie.